Senator Perdue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your patience and forbearance this morning for being here, guys. First of all, I want to make a comment about the closed classified briefing we had on July 31st. I must have attended a different meeting, Mr. Chairman, but I got a lot out of that meeting. Those today have said that we got no answers, but I think we addressed one thing in that closed briefing I'd like to touch on today, knowing that we're in an open environment. Secretary Mandelker, first of all, let me clarify a couple of things. Are you familiar with the Russian primary reserve fund that they've just closed down?
Generally, Senator, but not.
So they just closed down their primary reserve fund. They're now using their welfare reserve fund for any profits, as you say, above $70 a barrel, let's say, on the oil sector. So we're beginning to have some impact, but it hasn't changed behavior yet. And here's my question. With the interconnectivity of the global economy, if we put sanctions on Russia, there's a trading partner that gets hit by that as well. Today, there's a study out in Germany by the Institute of World Economy that says that about 40% of the detriment of a sanction is borne by the trading partners across 37 countries that are dealing with Russia. Now, that sends two messages. And I don't think they're either are bad. Number one, in Russia, we're going to continue to do this, and to trading partners of Russia, we're going to continue to do this. Is that true?
I can't verify this particular statistics, but I can tell you there's no question that when you impose sanctions on particular types of entities in Russia, there are those impacts are felt elsewhere, and that's because of the fact that Russia is part of the global economy.
Right, it's a global economy. So then the question is it U.S. companies or is it European? Europeans are now saying that they're bearing more of the brunt because they have a higher degree of trade with Russia, and I begin to believe that subjectively. But from a quantitative point of view, with CATSA, you have authority to do more than we're doing today. Is that true?
Senator, we have, as I've already mentioned, we have issued a wide swath of designations under CATSA, under executive orders. We can always do more, and
so that's the question. Let me go right there. Without getting into classified issues here, there are more things that you can do, but there is a governor that is being used right now by someone in the administration that says that the impact on the negative side here, the short-term impact, we're not willing to bear that. Is that true or not?
I wouldn't say that's true, Senator. With respect to any particular designation that we issue, of course, we very closely study the impact. We want to know what the impact is going to be to U.S. businesses, to U.S. jobs, what the impact is going to be to our closest allies and partners. We also engage in a number of different discussions with those allies and partners. We study those carefully. We look to see how we can mitigate those kinds of consequences, and we make our decisions accordingly.
But you would agree that with a larger economy like Russia, it's about $1.5 trillion economy. It's an entirely different equation than trying to deal with a $400 billion economy like Iran or a smaller economy like North Korea. That's a fact.
I agree that those are different complex problems.
And that the sanctioning regime is not an end-all. You've already said it's got to be a whole of government. We haven't talked enough about that today. Are you integrating with other facets of the administration for an ultimate outcome here, and that is a change in behavior in Russia?
Absolutely, Senator.
So what other agencies do you guys integrate with in terms of trying to change behavior in Russia?
We work closely with the State Department. We work closely with the intelligence community. We work closely with the Department of Homeland Security and others.
So, Secretary Ford, Russia has now dumped about $90 billion of U.S. treasuries. They're doing other things to prepare for this next round of whatever sanction regime efforts that we might make. What efforts are you aware of that Russia is trying to do prepare, and are there things that we can do to counter that prior to the issuing of any further sanctions?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think in an open session it's probably unwise not to get too much into specifics about that. It is safe to assume that the Kremlin is preparing for potential future sanctions because they know full well what they intend to do, and therefore I assume they can also anticipate that if they continue to do the kinds of things that they have done that have drawn sanctions in the past, that we will continue to react to that.
And are we in the State Department dealing with our allies, particularly European allies, who I think are bearing a higher degree of impact of this? Are we in comfortable position that they're going to stay with us, particularly when we talk about Nord Stream 2 proactively? Are we going to try to do anything to preclude that? Are the Russian allies hanging in there with us right now, and how do you project that as we get further into the sanctioning effort?
Well, it's an ongoing piece of the diplomatic challenge. We, of course, hope that the people will hang with us in this. We think we've been doing a pretty good job of keeping the team together so far. One example of that is the ongoing engagement that we have had with our European friends with respect to ensuring the continued rollover of sanctions against Russia for Crimea. This is the kind of thing we spend a lot of time doing. You mentioned the issue of mitigating impact upon the U.S. economy, for example. One of the things that we did when a couple of weeks ago we issued sanctions against Russia for its chemical weapons attack in the U.K. Is we had a series of the most significant piece of that had to do with denial of export of national security controlled items, a presumption of denial from the United States. One of the carve-outs that we had from that in an effort specifically to try to take into consideration the kind of concerns that you identified, sir, is a carve-out for national security exports to U.S. companies operating in Russia, so that we're not hurting our people operating in Russia. And we also had a carve-out for Russians employed by U.S. companies in the United States, for example. So we are always mindful of those kinds of effects, and we try to mitigate them as best we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Jones.